The yes vote that will replace Turkey's parliamentary system with an all-powerful presidency. 51.4% of voters chose to change the constitution. But is this narrow margin a sign of deep division? And what does it mean for Turkey's relationship with the EU? This is Inside Story. Hello there and welcome to the programme. I'm Laura Akyol. Turkey's president has declared victory in Sunday's referendum that grants the presidential office new sweeping powers. Recep Tayyip Erdogan says it's a historic decision. Turkey's presidency has traditionally been a largely neutral and ceremonial one, without many political responsibilities as specified under the constitution. Now, the yes vote gives the president to be elected in 2019 new powers to appoint vice presidents, ministers, high-level officials and senior judges. It will also allow the president to dissolve parliament, issue executive decrees and impose states of emergency. We'll get to our guests in just a moment, but first here's Jamal El-Shayal reporting from Ankara.
On the face of it, it looks like business as usual for Turks here in Ankara, but this is no ordinary Monday as people woke up to a new political reality that they're still trying to figure out how to deal with. Now, the president will be chairing a meeting of the cabinet later on Monday. It's expected that he will renew the state of emergency that was put in place following the July 15th failed coup attempt. What impact that has on things moving forward, we're not sure, but really the state of emergency hasn't really affected people's movements. There isn't really a curfew here. The president, as well as the yes camp, had promised and said that they needed a win in this referendum in order to bring about stability to the country. Turks will be hoping, regardless of their political opinion, that the political leadership here will now deliver on that message. It's important to note that these changes don't come into effect until the next presidential elections, but nonetheless there appears to be a renewed mandate for the AK party. How they deal with that, particularly considering that it was such a tight election results, as usually is the case with referendums, is still unsure. Society still remains divided here, but there is a chance maybe to build some sort of consensus. So a new political reality here in Turkey. What that means in the long term, obviously, theoretically we know, but how the government and how Erdogan himself will translate that in terms of policy and actions in the coming weeks and months, we wait and see. Jamal El-Shayal for Inside Story, Ankara.
Well, foreign observers say the referendum fell short of international standards and the opposition says it'll challenge the result in court. Bernard Smith reports now from Istanbul, where the majority voted against the constitutional changes.
The division in Turkish society this referendum exposed is as deep as the Bosphorus that cuts through Istanbul. 51% of voters in this city, normally supportive of their former mayor, now President Erdogan, said no to changing the constitution.
As a student and a woman, I was very disappointed. I can't think of what the future will bring.
It was such a tight result for Erdogan. It won't be easy for him to win the next presidential election.
With such a narrow margin in favour of changing the constitution, those who said no are hoping their views won't be ignored.
Erdogan should work to end this polarization in society. That would be the constructive thing to do.
If 50% said yes and 50% said no, he'll have to take into account those who said no.
The country, the republic, secularism hasn't been destroyed. One vote can change the lifestyle of millions.
It wasn't only Istanbul that voted against the constitutional changes. Other major Turkish cities, Ankara, Antalya, Adana, Izmir and pro-Kurdish areas also said no. The next presidential election is scheduled for 2019. President Erdogan can't afford to lose any more support in these areas between now and then. Bernard Smith, Al Jazeera, Istanbul.
So some big talking points there, and let's bring in our guests in Ankara. Elif Esen, Director for Regional Studies at the Department of International Relations at the Office of the Presidency of the Republic of Turkey. In London, Ege Seckin, a Turkey specialist at the political risk firm IHS Markit. And in Boston, Mustafa Akyol, Senior Fellow at Wellesley College's Freedom Project. Great to have you all on Inside Story. Thanks for being with us. First of all, let's look at the vote itself. And Elif, we've got the opposition demanding that the results be nullified. International observers saying that the vote fell short of international standards. What's the government's response to that?
First of all, let's make this very clear. This was not about empowering one man. This was about developing and further reforming the Turkish democracy itself. And this is a change in the system, not in the regime. As for the allegations for the voting, so Turkish democracy has had 7 elections in the past decade, in which the Turkish public showed great interest, which is illustrated in the expansion of high voter turnout. Last night, as we saw, there was over 85% of voter turnout, and the results was neck to neck. So it is highly ironic that for a population whose interest and participation in democracy is expanding, and there are clearly fair and fair elections, even the ballot box is transparent, there is this kind of speculations which especially rises when they hear that the results are not to their liking.
Mustafa, are you satisfied with that response there from Elif, that the elections were transparent, that there's no need to contest the result?
Well, I accept the legitimacy of the election, and there are some irregularities about the ballots. The High Board of Elections, they approved some ballots which did not have the stamp on it, and they said they did it in the past for some pragmatic reasons, and that is something that has to be sorted out. So we will see that, and I don't want to make a judgment on that. But I do accept the legitimacy of the vote. President Erdogan obviously has a big voting bloc which votes for him in all elections. But the point here is this. I would disagree with some of the comments from Ankara. I think this was about empowering President Erdogan more than anything else. The push for a presidential system began in Turkey in 2012 when Prime Minister, then Erdogan, decided to become the president. And the whole campaign was about him. The whole propaganda was about how Erdogan is important for Turkey, how he's the savior of Turkey, and why we should give him all the authorities. And this has brought Turkey to a position called illiberal democracy, in which you have ballots, you have votes, and elections are free. I'll accept that. But other key aspects of democracy, liberal democracy, such as freedom of speech, rule of law, separation of powers, that are being undermined. And my main problem with this new design is that it really brings not just the executive, but the legislation and the judiciary practically under the control of president, which is against what we call as checks and balances.
Ege, is that a view?
Can
we just bring in Ege just for one moment, just to get all 3 points laid out on the table? Ege, what's your response to the vote today?
Well, I would like to lend my support to the comments coming from Mustafa Akyol. The point about the process of the referendum having been free and fair is in stark contrast to what happened on the ground throughout the process. Looking at the continuation of the state of emergency throughout the process, looking at the domination of the media coverage throughout the process by the supporters of the Yes campaign, the imprisonment of key members of the opposition, again, in the lead up to the referendum. These are all big concerns that a lot of people in Turkey share. And the government will need to take into account the concerns of that 50%, or let's say 49-point-something% bloc in the country. And this will be a big challenge going forward, and it remains to be seen how they will deal with that.
Elif, let's address that point. This Erdogan victory, or the referendum victory as you perhaps would prefer it to be spelled out as, did pass by the slimmest of margins, 51.4%. How is Erdogan now going to unify Turkey, given that half of it was very much against this move?
Let's get back to the point made by Mr. Akyol, stating that the presidential system, the campaign was introduced in 2012, which is factually incorrect. AK Party governments, even from its first establishments back in 2001, AK Party has defended a presidential system, a change in the system which was not working in Turkey's favor. And with the elections of 2011, actually the AK Party government offered to establish a committee within the parliament with equal members from each opposition party. So they all had 4 members each, and they discussed the constitutional amendments in which AK Party again and again defended and fought for a presidential system. So this is the first point. As for the media campaign, I have here today, like with me, today's opposition newspaper, which is clearly and openly continuing its opposition. So I don't see any change in that. And with regards to the freedoms of expression, again, we also see the journalism as being a profession above the law, which is not the case anywhere in the world. Why should it be the case in Turkey? The journalists and the freedom of speech, so to say, in question, have to face the justice of this country, because let's not forget, this country has lived one of the most dangerous threats against its democracy.
Elif, let's let Mustafa respond to some of those points that you've made there. Let's move it forward a little bit from the intricacies of the AK Party you were talking about, moving it on to the unfair playing field. Mustafa, do you agree that it was open, that the opposition had equal access to campaigning as the government did?
Sure. First of all, I think we disagree on some facts. As what I know, and I can actually prove, that AKP was not pushing for a presidential system in the first decade of its power when Erdogan was prime minister, and he was happy with a strong prime ministry. The drive for this, not the electoral campaign, but the drive for this began in 2012. I remember very clearly because I was writing in a pro-AKP newspaper at the time, which was, so that's one thing. The other thing is, this election is free, but not very fair, given all the facts mentioned by the other speaker from London. There has been an enormous state power behind the yes campaign. Turkey was filled with yes posters all over, and people who campaigned for no had many challenges. And when it comes to journalists, yes, there are a few opposition newspapers in Turkey today, and for some reason, some of their editors or writers are in jail. And yes, every country has laws, but if these journalists were subject to the laws of the European Union, none of them would be in jail. So Turkey has very draconian laws when it comes to freedom of speech and the press. And the AKP, which was actually critical of these when it didn't have the state, when it didn't have power, became very defensive of those and made them even harsher. So I think it is fair to say that this has not been a very fair campaign, and Turkey has major issues when it comes to freedom of speech, which doesn't make the government illegitimate. I'm not saying that, and I accept the vote. Turkish society voted for this. This constitution, it will be with us. The new constitutional design will be with us. But indeed, President Erdogan and his supporters and his staff has to reckon with the fact that half of the society almost said no, and how to make peace in a country so divided must be the question
that's the issue that I really want to get to right now.
Turkey was like Tunisia, where different political camps made one
EU leaders calling for a broadest national consensus from Erdogan in implementing these sorts of changes. Do you see Erdogan being in a position to make this kind of movement to try to reconcile the country?
Well, that will depend on where he sees his interests lying. If he thinks that this would serve to consolidate his rule and move forward with the next plans or the next steps of the introduction of the presidential system, sure. For example, the question about reconciling with the Kurdish segment of the population We have seen the ruling party in the weeks leading up to the referendum making a 180-degree switch in its approach in that direction, from a much more hawkish and nationalist rhetoric towards once again trying to embrace the Kurds as it did throughout the peace process back in 2013 to 15. These will be the big questions that we need to watch out for. Whether the ruling party and whether Erdogan will choose to continue with the confrontation that has dominated their rhetoric and narrative in the past few years, or whether Mr. Erdogan will see this opportunity or this current situation as an opportunity to finally embrace broader bases of society. But the precedent and the past experiences in the country in the past couple of years would suggest otherwise.
Okay. Elif, you said that this referendum was not about empowering one man, not about empowering. Let me just put this question to you. These expanded presidential powers are due to start in 2 years following the next presidential election. Is Erdogan likely to win that vote?
Well, as you said, this is a process. So this was not just about last night either. This was enacted through parliament and then put to vote to people. So let's not talk as if this is an overnight transformation.
No, okay, but is Erdogan, in 2 years' time, is Erdogan likely to win that vote, given the polarization that we've seen in today's vote?
2 years now, yes, yeah. Well, I'm not a clairvoyant, so to say that everybody will be here in 2 years' time would be against my beliefs. But yes, yes, the constitutional amendments, this change will be enacted in 2 years' time, and we will see who will run and who will win. Of course, we would like President Erdogan to run again, as he has always run successful campaigns and led to the development and reform in this country, but we will see.
Okay, so can I just ask then, can I ask how he intends to unify the country? Because what this vote has exposed is the deep division within Turkey. You've got the 3 main cities and then some voting against these changes. What do you want to see Erdogan doing to try to bring Turks back together?
So let's first state this fact, that this is a referendum. This is not an election. So in every other referendum that we saw in Europe, for example, in the last couple of years, we always had this close calls, this neck and neck solution results, which does not necessarily mean that the country is divided in unconsolably into 2. So why did they treat Turkey differently than European states, where there is a functioning and let's say, improving democracy? So this is, I think, this is disrespectful of the Turkish people and their will to power.
I can see you shaking your head there. Do you want to jump in?
In the following years, what we expect
let's just hear from Ege. He wants to jump in.
The juxtaposition. I'm afraid the juxtaposition with the European examples of referendums really does not hold up in this case, because there are big questions about the validity of referendums, or how wise it is to push with referendums on big questions, even in countries like here in the UK.
Excuse me, I cannot accept that.
May I please finish?
Let's just hear what Ege has to say.
May I please finish my sentence? What I'm about to say is that your claim that there is no division in European countries where referendums have been held is really inaccurate and is really far from the facts. There are big questions about how to unify societies.
I would just like to comment on this.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. What I wanted to add is that you speak as if there is a minor separation, like division in Europe, whereas in Turkey there is so there is a division that we cannot overcome.
Okay, Mustafa, is there a division in Turkey that cannot be overcome? Let's bring Mustafa in now.
Democracy functions as it does in Europe.
Well, let me answer the question to how Turkey's polarization might be overcome. This is obviously not just a matter of one side, but 2 sides. But for President Erdogan, and the whole media empire he controls, they can do one simple thing: stop defining people who said no as enemies within. Stop defining them as pawns of crusaders, as we saw in the media today. Stop defining them as people who sided with the terrorists and the pushists, and to understand and agree that Turkey has different colors, different ways of life, different values, and all of them are equal citizens. So if President Erdogan and his party and his supporters constantly give that message, I think we will move on to a better future. Otherwise, we will be a divided country where one side praises one man, the other side fears the same man. And Turkey will be a very, very hard place to govern and very, very challenging society.
Elif, is that a message that we're likely to hear from Erdogan?
Yes, of course. If you have listened to his speech last night, you would have, I think, understood what he was going to do. But like, let's pitch in. There is this, I think, misconception that there is only one side to this story. There are two sides of this story, which one side we tend to demonize, and the other side we tend to portray as victims, which is not the case here. So let's just be clear on that. And as for, say, Erdogan voters are not happy being, let's say, represented as sheep rather than individuals with free will. So
I want to move the discussion on, I'm afraid. I just want to move the discussion on. We've got a very important issue that we haven't addressed, and we are running out of time. EU membership. Ege, what does this mean, this result, for EU membership talks?
Well, that depends on whether Erdogan would like to push forward with his desire to hold a referendum for capital punishment. I think that will be a very crucial turning point for Turkey's relationship with the EU. Capital punishment was done away with in the country a while back, and the reintroduction of that would appear to come in contrast with what is expected by the EU in terms of Turkey's legal framework. So that will be a key question to watch out for.
Elif, why Erdogan has said that he wants to review the suspension of the death penalty. Why would that be?
Oh yeah. So let's just say that Erdogan expressed a view that is held by a fraction of the Turkish society, and he said that if the parliament, if the parties, including the main opposition party, agree to do this and bring it to the approval of the presidency, he would say yes. Because this is an issue that has to be discussed and approved by the parliament. Yes, there is outcry because, again, let's remember what happened on July the 15th, where 249 people were shot and murdered point blank, where the parliament was bombed. So there is an outcry in Turkey for the justice to be served.
Okay. Mustafa, given the contentious nature of this point, do you think that Turkey is still interested in EU membership?
I think big parts of Turkish society are still interested in European Union membership, but I doubt President Erdogan is interested in EU anymore. I think he would like to have transactional relations with Western countries, like pragmatic relations based on economy and other interests. But accepting European political standards to Turkey I think, is not something President Erdogan wants anymore. He wanted in the beginning. In his earlier years, he wanted and he loved the European criteria because it helped his political party great time by, for example, pushing the military out of political power. But other aspects of European political criteria, such as journalists, freedom of speech, freedom of media and all that, President Erdogan doesn't like these values anymore. And of course, there's a vicious war of words between European members, European leaders and Turkish leader as well. And on that side, I blame both sides. But sadly, Turkey doesn't look like it's going to embrace European political criteria anytime soon. Okay. That's still, however, I think people who want a liberal democracy in Turkey should still try to preserve whatever links Turkey has with the European Union and the Council of Europe.
Okay, well, those deep divisions certainly on display here today on Inside Story. I just want to thank very much all our guests for joining us, Elif, Esen, Ege Seckin and Mustafa Akyol. And you too, thank you for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website, that's aljazeera.com. For further discussion, do go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Laura Kyle, and the whole team here, bye for now.